Hello, everyone. Welcome to Swing Politics Senate Edition. This is actually the first post for this channel, and today I'm going to go through everything you need to know about the 2020 Senate race in North Carolina. So, to start off, the current incumbent is Republican Thom Tillis. He is the junior senator from North Carolina, and he's from a state that historically trends red. Now, in 2008, President Obama did end up flipping North Carolina by about 0.3%. However, in 2012, Mitt Romney flipped it back, and Trump maintained the Republican stronghold in 2016 by 3.6%. However, Thom Tillis could be facing an extremely challenging race this year, and we'll go into some of the factors that might be causing that challenge. But first, let's look at the history of this seat, and especially the history of Thom Tillis' elections. So, the first election, the only election that he has as he is a first-term senator, is his 2014 election. So we see here that he beat out incumbent Senator Kay Hagan by 1.7%. Now, to give you some perspective, in 2014 it was a midterm, and the midterms of 2010 and 2014 both trended heavily towards the Republicans. The Republicans ended up flipping 8 seats in the Senate, taking control of the majority, 54 to 46. Now, if we compare this map of Thom Tillis' election against an incumbent compared to the following election cycles with Richard Burr versus Deborah Ross. Richard Burr is the incumbent senator. He won by I believe it was 5.7% against Deborah Ross. And we see when comparing these two maps that the Richard Burr 2016 map is a lot more red and a lot less blue compared to the 2014 much lighter pink, much lighter blue, much more blue map of 2014. And so we clearly see here that incumbency plays an important role. Regardless of whether or not it's a Democrat or a Republican, it does give about a 2 to 3 point bump. So this kind of indicates that in 2020 we might see whoever is on the ballot running against Thom Tillis, which in this case it is actually State Senator Cal Cunningham. He won the Democratic primary on Super Tuesday, just about over a week ago. We'll see that he will have that Thom Tillis will have that incumbency bump compared to Cal Cunningham, making it extremely difficult for him to flip this seat. However, if we compare the 2016 Senate results of Richard Burr versus Deborah Ross compared to the 2016 presidential results for North Carolina, we see an almost identical map between this and this map, which indicates again it goes to support the fact that whoever is on the ticket in 2020, the Democrat, which will likely be Joe Biden at this point, whoever is on the ticket is going to have a significant role in whether or not the Democrat can perform well against incumbent Thom Tillis. So now we have to look at Thom Tillis' approval rating and his recent stats overall. So Morning Consult has really done a great job at compiling all of the approval ratings of the senators. So when looking at Thom Tillis, he started out his term +9 above water, and as we went along throughout his term, since of course 2016 or the beginning of 2017, he slowly becomes his approval rating slowly goes underwater. It comes above water, it goes underwater, and now we're left at with the most recent quarter being plus. So his approval rating is -3, 34% approve and 37% disapprove, and that's not great for an incumbent. Incumbents generally should have higher approval ratings, as we can see here. Democrats do not approve of him, Republicans rightly do, and even independents don't. And not only that, adding up these two numbers of 34 plus 37 is going to be 71, which means there's a whopping 29% of voters in his state that do not have an opinion on him or they don't know of him. And incumbency is extremely helpful only if you have good name recognition. And clearly with this, Thom Tillis does not have amazing name recognition, which might not be a great factor for him in the following election coming up in 2020. More than that, let's look at money fundraising that has occurred over since the beginning of this race. Now, as I mentioned before, Cal Cunningham, the state senator from North Carolina, ended up winning the primary. He's been endorsed by the DSCC as well as has some other super PACs. However, his fundraising is still underwater, as we can see here. Compared to Thom Tillis, he has just a war chest of money. I mean, he's raised almost $10 million compared to Cal Cunningham's 4.5. He spent $5 million compared to Cal Cunningham's 3, and he just has more cash on hand. Now, cash on hand is extremely helpful for all these races. However, there is an interesting situation when we look at the seat. Let's go back to 2014 when Thom Tillis was running against Kay Hagan. We can see, it's just going to load here, we can see that Kay Hagan had way more money than Thom Tillis, nearly 15 million more. Regardless of that, Thom Tillis still won, which goes to show that money doesn't necessarily mean a one election. I mean, it's very much with the partisan swing as well as a lot of other factors that come into this. And let's go back even more. 2008. 2008, as we know, was a huge Democratic swing year after George Bush left with the economy in a recession. Obama came in, he swept the House and the Senate. We can see here in 2008, Elizabeth Dole had almost $11 million more than Kay Hagan. Kay Hagan still won. And even going back to 2002, which feels like an absolute eon ago, Elizabeth Dole and Erskine Bowles, I don't know this one very well, the money was very tight, and regardless, the Republican won. So we can clearly see here that while the money is not necessarily on Thom Tillis or on Cal Cunningham's side yet, it might get there in a bit. And next up, we have to look at polling, because how important is polling? It says everything. Although 2016 did throw some people off, there is certainly, polling has in the past been very predictive. So let's look at the recent polling that has come for Thom Tillis and Cal Cunningham. So we see here this was a poll that both of these were released in late February. The Marist College poll has Cal Cunningham up 5 points, yet East Carolina University has Thom Tillis up 2. Now these were both relatively recent. Now let's look at now this next poll, Public Opinion Strategies poll, was released actually by the Tillis campaign. And now this was done on January 11th to January 15th, which was a while ago. So Thom Tillis might have waited and held on to this poll. His campaign managers might have held on to this poll until it seemed like a good time to use it to kind of give Tillis a bit of a boost, just because polls can even influence voters. However, just, I believe, a day later, February 25th to 26th, there was a public policy polling. Now, granted, public policy polling does tend to lean a bit more Democratic. It still had Cunningham up 5 points in a swing state, which is even outside of the margin of error. So that's a big deal. Now, final prediction for this. Let's go through the steps. Thom Tillis won by 1.7% in 2014 against an incumbent. Trump won by 3.6%. He is a very good challenger who has money, but not nearly as much. All of the facts that Cal Cunningham is underwater with approval rating, that he may or may not be behind in the polls, it still points to the fact that this race will be a toss-up. This race will certainly be a toss-up, and Politico, the Cook Political Report, and the Sabato's Crystal Ball, all three of them had this as a toss-up, and it was recently changed. However, the reason why I give this one as a Republican hold is because North Carolina tends to poll a bit wonky with regards to polling in favor more of Democrats, but then voting with Republicans. And so I very well predict that Thom Tillis could win with the incumbency bump and everything else going on, and even Trump being at the top of the ticket, which could help Republican voters, or Joe Biden being at the top of the ticket, which could help Democratic voters in North Carolina. There's really no way to know, and I'm putting it as a very close Republican hold, like within 1 to 2%, maybe even less. But it is certainly possible, based on the polling and based on Thom Tillis' approval rating and his lack of name recognition, that this seat could go for Cal Cunningham. So thank you very much for listening to this analysis, and I hope you enjoyed it. Next up, I'm going to be looking at these four congressional seats here, which are in play. District 2, District 6, District 8, and District 9 for the U.S. House. Thank you so much for listening, and please subscribe, click those bells, and check back soon.